I texted Eliza on the Venus Kazemi and I said, I'm going into the woods with a bunch of witches for a retreat with Willow. Happy Venus Kazemi. And she goes, I'm also going into the woods with a bunch of witchy women for a retreat with my mother. Happy Venus
Oh
Kazemi.
my God. Hello and welcome. This is Down to Astro. I'm Chani Nicholas.
I'm Thea Anderson.
And I'm Eliza Robertson.
We are recording this episode on Wednesday, April 2nd. In this podcast, we talk about the astrology of the moment, what has just happened astrologically, what has just happened here on Earth, which is always in these days of wherever we are, way too much to fully mention, but we do our best. So this is what we just went through. We just went through March, which we all said was one of the biggest months of 2025. And this is why. We had two eclipses. We had a Venus retrograde, a Mercury retrograde, and Neptune entering Aries for the first time in 50 years?
150 years.
Thank you. 150 years. So big deal. We've never, ever in our lifetime, anybody that I know that's alive, maybe somebody has that's here somewhere, but we've never experienced Neptune in Aries as a transit on the Earth. So we had everything happen in Aries, which is a sign that starts a lot of fires, that gets a lot going. So I was really looking at this month for signs of life, for signs of pushback, and for signs of protest. And maybe, and I hope this is just the very beginning, that what has started this month in March especially is going to be the seed for a lot of protesting and dissent to happen globally, and also specifically in countries that are affected the most by a hostile government takeover, fascism, oligarchy, and the like. Okay, so there's too many things to even parse out in terms of how all this astrology landed, but I just want to say the 1st of March is when Venus stationed retrograde in the sign of Aries, and the last time that happened was 2017. So we're looking back to the mirroring images of 2017 and now. And then the very last days of March is when we had the last eclipse in Aries that we will have near the North Node for almost a couple decades, like a couple years shy of a couple decades. And so we want to look at the last 2 years. What has happened over the course of the last 2 years that aligns with those eclipses? And so when we put those two things together, I'm just going to be really like broad and general for a second so that we can start to like build a storyline. We put those two things together. I think we can all agree that one of the biggest storylines that has unfolded globally is that of the genocide in Gaza, is that of the ethnic cleansing that has been happening there, along with Congo and Sudan and other places in the world where devastation has been wrought by humans, mostly men. But we have been in a collective conversation specifically about what has been happening in Palestine because it's so succinctly connected with the eclipses that began in 2023. And we've done a lot of work on this podcast to parse out how the beginning of the entire situation, like 1948, we could say it started way before that, but officially 1948 is connected to the eclipses that we are just leaving now. So the beginning of the Nakba is connected through eclipses to the eclipses we've just experienced through 2023, 2024, and we just finished the last one in 2025. So if we look at that, this last 2-year period, and take that as one of the main things that the world has been talking about, because you'd have to be like living under a rock to not have heard something about the conversation about Palestine and what has happened there. And so that's one of the main things that we have to look at. And then if we think of the last time Venus retrograded through Aries as being 2017, this exact time of year, then we had massive protests in relationship to the administration that had just come in, which was Trump. And so 8 years later, we have the same administration. We have worse problems than ever before. The administration has ramped up its fascism to level 1,000,000. And the conflation of these two things, the connection of these two things is really important in a lot of different ways. And I'm sure that political, experts and pundits and scientists and all kinds of, folks could do a much better job of connecting these things than I can, or that we can, because we're astrologers here. But the main point is that this administration is actively disappearing a lot of different folks, one group of which are the people that have been protesting, the student organizers that have been protesting the genocide in Palestine for the last couple of years. And the fact that the so-called ceasefire was, just torn up and thrown away, and that Israel continued its onslaught of violence in Gaza over the course of this last eclipse in Aries. So I'm looking at how all those things have been compiling as partly Venus retrograding through Aries. It's now currently in Pisces, but having that last eclipse also kind of take place at the same time, and then Neptune going into Aries, and us, as we're recording this, moving into what feels like a little bit of maybe a different phase of things. But there is this kind of groundswell of stuff that has just happened in Aries. And there have been hundreds of Tesla protests that have taken place all over the country and all over the world. There have been so many protests in town halls. There have been people calling out their representatives. There's been just like a lot of gatherings, a lot of, I wouldn't say uprisings quite yet, but there has been a groundswell of political activity from citizens and from other leaders of other countries, which we will definitely get into. Okay, that's my opening little statement. Does anybody want to add anything to that?
I'm just so glad March is over. But I mean, even though we're still in the thick of it, we're still very much in the thick of it. But March, I remember thinking, ooh, this might be the hardest month of the year, or at least it's going to be very impactful. And so far that has panned out in all of the ways.
March, listen, if we need to turn a corner, I feel like eclipses and Venus retrogrades will do that on a personal level, on a societal level. The, there's just the things that you can't turn away from. And it's just been in so many people's lives, and then also across the news and the collective in this country and this globe. It's just been incredibly, like, just a whole underworld journey, just in every sense of the word. Um, so yes, it's been really hard. And we are still in the thick of it. But I feel like we've kind of turned a corner. And I love what you said, Chani, about the groundswell, um, and sort of really energizing this body politic in the US of like, okay, it's so clear to me what's going on. Like it's unavoidable. So that then the distractions have kind of slipped away as Neptune goes into Aries.
I want to touch on the groundswell piece because I've been thinking about this in relation to the trajectory of American politics over the last several years, considering this 8-year Venus return in some ways that we are having with regards to the retrograde period. And one thing that I keep thinking about is what we need is this collective mobilization. And we need that to be stronger than all of the money that Elon Musk has. And I think we're seeing glimmers of that being so. Like it was just announced, I believe, yesterday that that Susan Crawford won the election to become the on the new seat of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. That was in spite of the fact that Elon Musk personally funded $25 million into her opponent's campaign. And yet the groundswell of support against, I should say, the groundswell of opposition against Trump and Elon Musk, and the groundswell of support in favor of, everything that opposes those ideologies, and just that the sheer fascism and oligarchy, as we've been talking about, that has been stronger. And what it reminded me of actually was um, the AOC's initial campaign. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's initial campaign, because her opponent, when she was initially running for Congress, had 18 times the money than she did, but she had the grassroots supports. She was working as a server and a bartender, and yet she was able to mobilize the support in that campaign for her. That was 2018, so like a year later than what we're talking about. But there's still, I think we can't underestimate the power of people when we're really banding together in opposition to just money. Like, money is not enough.
I keep going back to when we were looking at the astrology and when we were looking at Inauguration Day, and we were looking at the fact that it was the Sun and Pluto coming together in Aquarius for the first time in how many hundreds of years. And we were talking about how, we knew that at that point, like, Elon Musk would be there. We didn't know, I think when we were talking about it, we didn't know like all the tech bros were going to be there. Like, we knew Trump had won and we knew that Elon was backing him. But I keep thinking about how I don't know if any of us really understood how integral he would become and be, and how powerful. I mean, I think we could like maybe see into it, but to have to be fighting this man and all of his millions of dollars just to get scraps of like some kind of semblance of like folks that believe in democracy. Like, no shade against anybody, but like, we're so far away from like an actual, party of people that want something so much more than just stopping Trump. And we've got to now spend all of our people power on just going up against his money. And the reason why we were talking about tech bajillionaires is because Pluto is a planet of wealth and power, and Aquarius, we could say, has a lot to do with tech and communications. It's an air sign. And so Pluto being in Aquarius in a conjunction with the sun on that inauguration day was just like, oh man, like what are those figures, like Elon Musk type figures, going to do? And then of course, I always want to say, like, this has always been like, it's just at these acute these crises, these compiling crises, these poly crises that we're in, it just reveals how deeply embedded we are in a system that has never functioned, and that we've never had stopgaps for the things in the system that don't work anyways. And obviously, like, I'll say this a million times until I've breathed my last breath, but Palestine and situations like that, places where apartheid thrives and exists for decades and decades and decades, is the litmus test. Like, that is already telling us we've gone too far down some road of absolute immorality. And so any country that props that up, right here is already lost. It's already so far gone. It's already not working as a democracy. And then we have this astrology that comes in that is like, looks so damning and so doom and gloom. And then you're like, oh yeah, here we are literally in Plutonian hell, in like Hades. That's the mark of this inauguration. That's the mark of this political, moment. And you're just like, yeah, we've all been plunged into this like reckoning with everything that has already existed, everything that has been rotting, everything that has been, a red flag for a very long time. So I do keep kind of swimming back to that. And I have these like moments where I get really like hopeful. Like, it's kind of like this delirium of like, okay, like now we know how bad it actually is. Now we can actually change it and not give up until it's changed. I do actually live in that place a lot more than I thought I would. And then I go to the place of like, oh my God, they have all the money. Like they have all the resources. And I do believe that people power will always win out when we can organize, when we can come together. And so I think like a lot of people, I vacillate between those two extremes. Like, wait, what are we fighting against? And how vast and how deep and how bad is it? And then how extraordinarily can we show up for each other in this moment? And we're recording this on April 2nd, which is 3 days before April 5th, which is supposed to be a massive day of protest. So I'm hoping by the time you listen to this, you will know. But I'm hoping that that is, again, another one of these compiling moments of getting all of us galvanized, because we need a very long-term, sustained, massive mobilization. Like we need to think about months and years into the future how we're going to sustain some kind of massive groundswell. So when I talk about March, or when we talk about the astrology here, it's like these are the pockets of time where you're like, ooh, what's getting seeded here? And then we want to look and see like what unfolds from this place. It's not like everything was supposed to happen in March, but that it's like these points of ignition and initiation and seeding that kind of start to get the ball rolling. And I can segue into something, which is that we all said, if you have Aries placements and Virgo placements in your chart in any kind of like major way, March, and then we like, roll a little into April, is going to be massive for you. And can I just name a couple of people? And I'm not even like endorsing these people. I just want us to think along the lines of like who has had a moment beyond the like overlords. So AOC is full moon Aries, born on a full moon in Aries. Bernie is a Virgo, if ever there was one, with a moon in Aries and Mars in Aries. Cory Booker has Venus at 10 degrees of Aries with Saturn in Aries and Chiron in Aries, and then also has his moon in Virgo and has Jupiter in Virgo, has the nodes at the exact same place that they're in right now, has the South Node in Virgo, has the North Node in Pisces. And I just want to say that Venus stationed retrograde at 10 degrees of Aries, exactly where his Venus retrograde in Aries is, meaning he was born in the exact same Venus retrograde cycle as this moment. Again, I'm not endorsing Cory Booker as anything for anything. I'm just saying that if you have these placements, this is the moment where you're going to have a moment. And the eclipse in Aries, that last one, happened basically right there, like at 9 degrees of Aries. And again, 10 degrees of Aries was where Venus stationed retrograde. And he's born under that Venus retrograde. And Venus is not in Aries right this second. But just saying, days after the last eclipse, right there, that lit up his Venus, that he just had a Venus return in such a special, profound way, he makes history. And he outspeaks an absolute racist from 1957 who was speaking against the Civil Rights Act. So there's just these like ways in which the astrology shows up that's also really like stunning, just from a purely like symbolic point of view, in terms of time, in terms of like rhythms, in terms of what gets lit up in somebody's chart.
There were a few pieces of news that we're going to touch on today that just brought me delight. Like I just delighted in certain things unfolding, but this was one of them.
Did you notice his Venus right away?
I did not, because I did not look at his chart.
Yeah.
But now I do.
Isn't that fascinating? And then he had the Virgo eclipse right between his South Node and his Jupiter. And this is an A rating. This chart is A rating. So it's a very early degree Aquarius. So it could be a Capricorn rising. But if it's not, that Venus rules the 9th house of law and courts.
It's perfect. It's exquisite.
It's the chart I would make. You know how if you make up fake charts for people, like this was very accurate.
But how does it even work to do a speech for 25 hours? Did he not eat? Did
How?
he not snack?
No,
He's a Taurus. He's
No,
a Taurus.
I know. He didn't eat for like 24 hours before, and he also didn't drink for 24. He's like starving himself. He's dehydrated. So
Oh my
because he
gosh.
didn't want to have to pee. I guess I thought maybe they wore diapers or something. I was like, there's got to be some sort of situation that happens. But he didn't eat or drink before and then did 25 hours and 5 minutes of this thing. Like physically, the endurance that takes is so wild.
I did say last episode that I think Venus and Aries was going to be filibusters.
Oh, you did. You did. You did. You did. You
I
did.
remember
You
that too,
did.
actually.
Nice. Good call,
Because
Thea.
I think Wendy, what's her name? She was a representative in the Texas House of Representatives. Remember she did the filibuster?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I don't know if that had to do with Venus. It was just reminding me of the moment. But also, I was like, how did he physically do that? And I was like, oh, South Node and Virgo, like I get it. You're like, I will deprive myself of
Uh-huh.
substance so that I can endure this
Yeah.
like very specific task. It just feels like the like things having to end with his moon there, just being like, no, I'm gonna deprive myself in order to do this thing.
Yeah, and like the South Node is right on his Jupiter as well. Like the South Node is at 26, 27. So he's having an exact nodal return. And then that South Node touching his Jupiter, which again is connected to courts and laws and, what you think and how you think it. And I wish he wasn't a Zionist. And also, what an incredible moment and thing for him to do. So we contain multitudes, all of us, and there's always hope, right? We can always change the tides of things, I believe. Okay, so I just wanted to also say, like, some of the political players right now have some interesting correlations to the main themes of March. Of course, AOC and Bernie went out on the road and did a Fight the Oligarchy tour, which I don't know about that branding, but anyways, it's very like, like plain, simple. There's not a lot of nuance to it. And they had like a record breaking amount of people come out. They're not running for office. They're not, obviously they're still going to be texting us all and asking for money. So we can, dissect that if we wanted to at a later time. But the fact of the matter is like 34,000 people came out to one of them. Like people were just coming out in droves, breaking records. And showing up. People really want to know what to do right now. So that is some of the groundswell. The Tesla takedowns have been fantastic. They've closed a lot of places. They've certainly, taken a massive dive as a company. So that's been really fun and entertaining to watch. I also want to say, like, one of the major things about the disappearing of people, about the snatching people off the street, especially people that were and have been protesting in honestly some very minor ways that are in the United States legally, as opposed to Elon Musk, perhaps, but taking people, abducting people, that all was happening as Neptune was really starring in a lot of shows. So Neptune and the North Node were connected through that period. Venus and Mercury were crossing over Neptune later in March. Neptune then changing signs. And I just think like the disappearing of people, the like, oh, sorry, we caught the wrong guy and sent him to like some sort of horrific concentration camp, but now we can't get him back because we don't have any jurisdiction over him. Like the disappearing of citizens, civilians, people that are here and have a right to be here and have a right to their freedom of speech, and just being like, oh, now they're gone, or now they're in some other state, or now they're in some other country, or now they're just like, we don't know what happened to them. Where, that feels in a lot of ways very Neptunian to me. And because Neptune was so heightened over the course of March, again, at the end of a sign, at the beginning of a new sign, going over the North Node, and then having like the Venus and Mercury kind of crisscrossing with it just felt very like, what in the God's name is going on? And we know that if you can disappear somebody that you're like, well, we don't know if what they're doing, you can disappear anybody, that it's like a pathway to being able to disappear anybody who dissents against the government. So that felt very eerie and also like on Neptune brand.
It's terrifying. I mean, we're talking about mass mobilization and protest, and that's never been a safe activity, but I would say especially so now. Like, your people are being disappeared for even accidentally attending these protests, never mind really going into it, like, willingly and mindfully.
Who
Um,
accidentally you've
Wanna misspeak, but wasn't there that one person who claims she was just like, she was trying to get home, but she kind of intercepted a protest, but because she
Oh,
had
I don't
some
know about this.
pro-Palestine tweets on her social media, they kinda
Uh-huh.
just scooped her up, and I don't remember if that's the one who's now trying to seek refuge in Canada, but there are quite a few people who are
Oh, right.
in hiding. But I might not have the most up-to-date intel on that, but I believe that was what she had said. In any case, it's it's scary. I mean, if you're trans right now, like, probably all you want to do is protest, and that's not at all safe. I mean, it's not at all safe for many people, not just trans people, but it honestly, it's, like, quite terrifying. It's terrifying how, I mean, we've lived with police violence and brutality for a long time, but I don't remember ever seeing this level of, oh, if you say the wrong thing or you like the wrong thing on your social media, you might literally vanish or end up in a concentration camp in El Salvador. Like, I don't remember that scale.
Mhm.
Maybe that scale of situation has
Mhm.
happened in the past
Mhm.
that I wasn't aware of, but or to different groups that didn't get as much buzz or press.
Right,
But it's
right, right, right. Like, this is not new, but it's definitely ramped up, and again, like, it has, been here, and that's the problem, is it has been here. There was a pathway paved for ICE to exist by Democrats, and so, like, the whole thing is malfunctioning and also functioning as it is supposed to. But
Well, mainstream media is like refusing to cover protests.
there was the one person who was snatched off the street, Ramisa
Do you have it?
Ozturk. She was abducted by ICE on March 25th,
Where they
2025
had the
for,
video?
yeah, for co-writing an op-ed in the Tough student newspaper criticizing the university's response to Israel's attack on Gaza and Palestinians. So that actually did go viral, which I was like, oh, okay. Now, I don't know what it was about that, but again, it was like a couple of days before the eclipse, and it was like this kind of heightened moment a couple of days before Neptune changes signs, and it felt like whatever it was about that video that struck the chord of something here, and finally mainstream media had to talk about it, and it was then everywhere. But we know that Mahmoud Khalil had been taken on March 5th, so a couple days after Venus stationed retrograde. So it's like, well, that already happened, y'all. It's the same thing. Why is it this? But also, thank God this is getting coverage and people are actually talking about it. Like, I make sure I talk to people who are not on TikTok and Instagram, like folks in their 60s and 70s. And I'm like, what do you know? Like, I don't know anybody who listens to Fox News, but I know people who listen to like CNN and da da da. And so when they know about it, I'm like, okay, it's hit something else. It's like
That's the
people are
litmus
actually.
test. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think the fear in mainstream media is palpable in terms of what stories are getting told. That's very Saturn, Neptune. How are we going to, like, what is the boundary of what we're going to say is real and actually happening, and it's all kind of
Mm.
just getting like, I think it takes something going viral where like it can't be denied.
Yeah, you're picking up on something so key, because I think everyone has felt that. It's like, how bad is this? How real is this? That's because Saturn and Neptune have been traveling together for a while now, and they're just going to get closer and closer and closer throughout the year and years. And it is that feeling of like, do we flee now? Like, Thea, I was going to tell you, I was going to text you and be like, if you ever want to stop doing Down to Astro because it makes you a target in this country, like, I get it. Like, I obviously make us all a little bit of a target. And but like, we are here talking publicly. Thea, you and I are in this country and in the United States. And just doing this, having this conversation is clearly something that will possibly end us on some kind of like list, like, people are watching. And so, we were going to have like a Chani staff retreat. And I'm like, if people don't, we have some people that don't work in the country. I'm like, if you guys don't want to come, I get it. Like, where are we? Like how bad am I making your lives? How bad is this for, all of us, all of
I
that?
mean, it's a thing. Like, I don't want to overemphasize this when there have been so many other cases of disappearances, which are, um, ongoing, and people have way fewer resources. But there was a Canadian who was detained for
Yeah.
2 weeks, and she had a work visa. She had like there was nothing off about her paperwork, and I was on the West Coast over the past couple of weeks, and I was with my mom, and my mom and I had previous plans to go to Seattle, and we were like, well, we made these plans, we're gonna stick to them. But we were both I've never had this happen where we were like rehearsing stories at the border, because my mom has an arrest record for environmental activism, and if you Google her
Oh,
name, it comes up. So we were like, okay, we
that's
have to
so
turn off our
cool.
So
phones.
badass.
I know my
Yeah.
mom's probably listening to this, so
Hi,
hey mom.
Mom.
Yay.
Thanks for protesting in BC. Does she protested like
In
the forest
BC.
industry? Oh my
Yeah.
God, I love it.
But like we were nervous about crossing the border.
Yeah,
And
because you should be.
that's as white folks, that's a privilege. We normally don't have to think that carefully about it. I'm just naming that because I know there are lots of people who've had to think that carefully for many, many years and decades and so on. But it does indicate, I think, again, the ramping up of like where are we? Like,
And it's so dislocating. It's so disorienting. It's so hard to know uh, what it all adds up to. But that's also, I think, a good place to be in our mind. I think we have to stay there. It's like, it's not over. They haven't won. Like, it's bad. We have a very short amount of time before it gets so bad it's not going to be able to be reversed for a minute at least. So this is like the pocket of time for us to act. This is that moment where everything is like, okay, there's still a lot of opening. Like there can be a lot of closings that happen from here, and like they're going to try to, if they can, they're going to try to keep us in, right? They're going to try to keep people out, and they're going to try to keep people in, and they're going to try to keep people incarcerated. Like they're going to try to keep people where they want them. And so before we get to that, we have to fight like hell to keep everything we can, and then to try to build something new. But these moments that happen, that pushback, are everything, because I think it keeps me emboldened. It keeps me being like, okay, we stay, we fight.
even just that language is so Saturnian, just thinking about how Saturn is soon going to join Neptune in Aries, but that language of like keeping us in. There's a sense, and keeping people out, like this vision of the wall, or a fortress that keeps people out, and again keeps those inside in.
And like the illusion of wars, and the illusion of the boundary, like
Yes.
the illusion of
And
a border.
borders.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is probably too optimistic, but the
Let's do it. Bring it,
I think
Eliza.
my hope for Saturn and Aries, like you mentioned, Neptune in Aries just bringing all of this confusion and murkiness around where these people are going. And I think the felt experience of those people too, like they're being abducted and taken, like being shoved onto buses and being taken to different cities and states and countries without being told where they're going. That's Neptune. And so my hope for Saturn and Aries is some kind of maybe legal pushback, or just like redefining of no, this is very illegal, people, and we cannot actually act like this. We cannot treat people like this. And I don't necessarily think realistically that that's going to happen, but that would be my highest hope for Saturn, is that it could somehow clamp down on that murkiness, and on just that level of just diabolical state behavior.
Can Saturn clamp down on Neptune, or does Neptune dissolve Saturn? I guess that's the
Yeah.
It's
question.
both,
We'll see.
and
Yeah.
but it can try. It can try. Damn it!
Yeah.
I like that hope, Eliza. I just feel Saturn is just too afflicted.
I know it's in its fall. It doesn't have like lots of strength in Aries.
A Venus in Aries makes it so that it is reflecting, the last two times, this time and last time, a time where women's rights, trans rights, queer rights our civil rights are just like absolutely attacked. So on one level, you can be like, oh, Venus retrograding through Aries is like a tough time for civil liberties and us, being able to be happy. And then it's also a time that galvanizes the collective like no other. Like 2017 and now have some standout qualities to them, not just in this country, but also like worldwide. So I guess the question is always like, how bad do we need to get it before we actually respond, before there's actually like pushback, before we actually try to change something, because we're all so busy and so waylaid by capitalism and corporate greed that we can't, figure out how to rebuild the world and pay the bills and take care of our kids and all that stuff. So it's like both. So maybe like Saturn being so degraded in Aries is like, well, what are the rules we actually need to have? Or like, what are the structures we actually need to build? Because there's none now. Like that, there's just like Saturn's like gone out the window. So then we have to bring that Saturnian thing and be like, how are we building? What are we building? And this is the time to build. I don't know. Maybe that's being too positive too.
I mean, the government is literally being gutted, which feels very like Saturn isn't even in its fault yet, but the government is being like bottomed out. But one thing I was thinking, I've thought of this when you mentioned mainstream media's response or lack thereof. I think it's truly a bad sign that even Joe Rogan, who endorsed Trump, is a Trump supporter. Even he's like, guys, this is a little fucked up. This is a little too on the nose fascism. I mean, he didn't use those words, but he
was
did
like, well, I'm not a
concern.
Republican. I just got him elected. So
I just got him elected with my bajillion, listeners.
yeah.
Well, that's the big problem, that our shadow president isn't actually good for the president. Not
You mean
popularity.
Elon Musk?
Yes.
How
Trump
so?
is tied to him,
Yeah.
to Elon Musk,
Yeah.
because of the money. We give Elon Musk all this power to fire people, to do everything that he's doing to like ransack the government. But it's actually really bad for his popularity. Like when you fire thousands of people and some of those people voted for you, I think that's a real predicament he's in.
People can also just see that he is the richest man in the world. Like, whose side is he on? Not on the side of the workers. Like, people must be able to see that.
No. I don't think so. I think that we live so deeply in capitalism that people are like, oh, rich is good. And therefore there's something good associated with richness. And I don't even mean only white people. Like that is something that is, there is something there where it's like, oh, daddy has all the money. And there's like this patriarchy scheme, pyramid scheme thing that's like rich white guy at the top that is like deeply embedded in the psyche of a lot of places and people, I think, unfortunately, like against our will. But wait, you were saying something. I don't think Trump actually even, and we can move on from this, but I don't even think he cares about being popular. He just wants the money. I don't even know if he cares that Elon's bad for him.
Yeah, but he cares about being able to move his initiative forward. And if there are real consequences to people being like, enough is enough, you can't do this, like justices,
like
etc., like those people, I think that's no, I agree with you.
Okay, so we were going to talk also about a couple other big stories, which I even have forgotten about Pete in the group chat. JD, what'd you guys do? Who did you add to the Signal, silly boys? Why are you using Signal? Lock her up.
Hello.
Who? What? So there's that whole thing that happened. And then Eliza has a whole other, take on the world and the global moment. But yeah, like I forgot about this. And it was like, 72 hours ago? So Thea, take us into Signalgate.
I will take you into Signalgate. Because as soon as it happened, I was like, can we talk about this? What is happening? So here's what happened. I think we all kind of know it was involved all the top officials of the land. And we had from like national security advisors, the director of the CIA, we had the Secretary of Defense, Mike Waltz, we had Pete Hegseth, Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense, and Mike Waltz is the National Security Advisor. I switched their titles. They have really important jobs.
They don't know their titles, so it's fine. They're not going to be offended. They're like, "Are you the what am I?" Okay.
So it all starts on March 11th when a journalist who is the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, named Jeffrey Goldberg, is added to a Signal chat that says Houthi small groups PC. So these are really important people across our government, across DC, and they add inadvertently a journalist. And Jeffrey is like, is this because he's told his story on the Daily and other podcasts? So we have kind of his take on how this all went down. He's thinking it's a hoax, right? An entrapment, which is so like Neptune of it all. It's so like Saturn, Neptune with the North Node, and Mercury like about to station retrograde. So right in March 11th, we're on this kind of very hazy period.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, I'm gonna watch and see what happens. I'll just stay here. I'll stay in this place. And so over the next like 72 hours, really important people at the top of our government start to then say who their POC is for like this conversation. And as that happens, he realizes that like a CIA operative's name has been identified in this chat, and that's never been revealed publicly. And so Jeffrey Goldberg starts to get kind of like an eerie sense, right? Like, oh, there's like people in the know. This couldn't be like a trap. This he's starting to wonder, like, I'll hang out here. And then the conversations start to intensify so much so that they start discussing the pros and cons of an airstrike of Yemen on the Houthi like rebel forces there, and whether or not optically it's going to be good to do, which is so ironic because optically the whole thing is what it is now.
Disaster.
It is what it is. And they even say like, oh my God, if this leaks, we're going to look so indecisive. So you have JD Vance being like, what is he like? Europe is pathetic. I mean, the fact that this is all out is just every single moment. I'm like, oh my God.
And were they like speaking in emojis? Like I don't know, strong arm emojis or something?
Well, once they dropped bombs on people, they spoke
Once
in
they
emojis.
murdered people.
Yeah, like ridiculous evil villains that have absolutely
And school children. Like
yeah. It's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. I wish it wasn't like involving murder. Like it would be so much better to make fun of them without the horrors of what they were actually literally doing to human beings and celebrating with fist bump emojis.
Well, so we have the lunar eclipse in Virgo on the south node occurs on March 14th on Eastern time zone. So it's like 2:54 a.m. Um, and at that moment, like that, if you're looking at sort of the astrology events, looking at that chart says so much because if you pin it to DC, you get a Sagittarius rising, and you get the lunar eclipse in Virgo in the 10th house.
Oh,
In the
wow.
event chart,
Yeah.
but also in US's natal chart, the Sibley chart.
Right.
So it's already feeling
like a
like
public
very visible.
loss.
visible.
Yeah.
Optics are
Leaky.
bad, boys.
Yeah.
Optics are
Leaky.
bad.
Everybody's going to see this.
Yeah. And it's happening as Mercury is stationing retrograde.
So, yes. So, Mercury, the planet, the messenger, the communicator, the signaler, the one who communicates, maybe like I would put journalists under Mercury. So, it's like
Absolutely.
all these, there's the heavy, heavy mercurial significations. Then, yes, the next day, Mercury stations retrograde. It's in Aries, the sign of war, of attack, of the Mars ruled sign, cardinal fire. And so, when Mercury is also in a place where it doesn't have a major aspect, it can't see where the eclipse is happening, which is like this whole kind of like we can't even see what we're doing, this like bizarre, like we have no idea that we've even added this person. It's all the astrological tidbits here are just really precise and so stunning that then what happens is it's like a day later. So on March 15th, after the eclipse, that's when the notorious text at 11:44 a.m. Eastern time zone goes out on the Signal chat, and Jeffrey Goldberg receives it. And that is the tactical, logistical, like sort of detailing of war plans, and saying it's going to happen at this time for these targets with these weapons. And so I just want to like take a step back. Like Signal is like what we've talked about now is like it's totally open. Like our government has more secure ways to communicate. Like, I mean, like I used to work in law. Like sometimes I wouldn't even like like go talk to people. You don't even like put it in an email. And there's just a fact that like
In most workplaces, you don't put it in an email.
don't put it in an email.
Call me. Don't text me. Don't eat. Like, what are you doing? Pete.
But also, like, why text a journalist? Like, what? Like,
So Mike Waltz inadvertently added. So nobody noticed the whole time. No one notices.
but that's a problem.
They don't notice that he's added, and they don't notice when he leaves, and you get a notification when you leave. They don't even
Nobody contacted him.
They don't even care. It's just like okay. So this is happening as we're having our very first eclipse near the South Node in Virgo, which we've all been talking about being a loss of details, a loss of looking at the facts and the data, a loss of noticing the small little things, and something to do with communication because it's Virgo, it's ruled by Mercury. And then this eclipse especially was so heightened because of the Mercury retrograde in Virgo, Mercury retrograde in Aries, which is going to be loud because it's Aries. So it's going to be like, no, this happened. Yeah, you guys did that.
And so Jeffrey holds on to so I guess he consults, he figures out, what do I do, right? Because like if I leave, they'll know, surely. But nobody says anything. He leaves and then he emails them and says, listen, this happened. He emails some of the officials that were there. And then on March 24th, he publishes an article in the Atlantic called
Yay, Atlantic.
Yeah, the Trump administration accidentally texted me its war plans. And it's so simple and concise and so poetic at the same time. Just like
Venus retrograde in Aries.
And Mercury retrograde in Aries.
Sorry.
Like,
Mercury retrograde in Aries. But yeah, both of them.
both of them.
And they're traveling together.
how many times do we write in a daily? Like, careful who you CC. It's literally a trope at this point.
And so yeah, so that's just kind of like we're in the fallout of that now. And the sort of aftermath is, so we're kind of like the fact that it happens in between the South Node eclipse in Virgo and then the solar eclipse in Aries, which has to do with leaders and people at the top. And a solar eclipse like is incredibly like such a bad omen for people who hold positions of power, right? If you're trying to lead a force or an attack or something. And so that to have the sun eclipse, it's like, I mean, this was just like Trump had egg on his face, Trump and the administration, the people around him. And yet it like what was really eerie to me, like it was what I was thinking the whole time about the idea of the substitution king, right? In ancient times, like when a ruler was on the throne and to protect the ruler, you get a guy. And I was like, is that guy Mike Waltz, right? Is that guy the guy that Trump is mad at? Actually, he's seriously mad at because he had Jeffrey Goldberg's number and added him in the first place. So even though Pete Hegseth, and we looked at his chart a little bit, like he was really like the way the eclipse landed on his like Saturn and Virgo, just like oopsie daisy, grave mistakes.
He has major Virgo, and he also has the moon at the very last degree of Pisces, and Neptune was right there, like right on his moon. So that is a once in a lifetime. Very few people will experience that in their lifetime because Neptune moves so slowly, kind of thing. And Neptune is a planet of leaks and losing things and forgetting things and just being deceived by your own idiocy. And like to have that happen alongside all of the other astrology that was occurring for him was just like beyond stunning. And he's also a Neptune conjunct the ascendant. So his own intoxication, whether it be metaphorical or literal, and lies and deception and sneakiness and all of that is just blatant and blunt in his chart.
It's the Lulu. And so, yeah, and he was having a delulu transit, which, like, couldn't even see, couldn't even, like, recognize, like, that he was texting one of the most important journalists in the world. And so yeah, so this kind of fallout from all of that just was so perfectly, like, the eclipses being when Mercury ruled, about communications and platforms, and
Mhm.
then and information itself,
Mhm.
right? Like, how do we
Mhm.
communicate classified information?
Mhm.
Now there's, like, all this discrepancy about what we're calling it, classified or what have you. But
Mhm.
then the eclipse that just happened at the end of March to be Mars ruled, and that hurt, that kind of ouch factor, and the war factor that we're talking about too. It's just so stunning the way that it played out. And um one of the things that I thought about was, I remember, because I follow the scholar astrologer Ali Alomi on Twitter, and he had tweeted around the time of the eclipse, like Virgo eclipses, and like, here's what Abu Mashar, mashallah, thought about them. And one of the things that he says is, like, calamity among nobles, tensions, chaos among advisors or rulers, scribal errors and confusion. So I just want to say, people in the ninth century knew
Scribal
this shit was
errors.
bad,
Yeah.
and then it
Yeah.
happened.
I love that Signalgate is a scribal error. That feels so
Scribal error.
appropriate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Love it, love it.
It's so telling that Trump isn't even pissed that this happened. He's pissed that his guy had a journalist on his contact list. Like, it's not surprising, but the narcissism is so
Mhm.
blatant that
Loud.
it's just it is loud.
I just thought, Thea, when you pulled up the chart for the Signalgate, I thought it was so ridiculous that Jupiter was in the first house.
Oh
Because
yeah,
like
I did.
Jupiter in Gemini just like blowing up the signal is so funny. And because we had that heightened Jupiter in Gemini moment in August when Mars was also in Gemini, I just like associate so much of the like flurry of hype and like the moment and like everybody just going wild and like going hog with something like online with anything significant in Gemini, especially like a Jupiter or a Mars. And so that Jupiter was like just up over the horizon and in the planet of communication. And the planet that rules the chart is Mercury. That's retrograde. It's like, it's so perfect that,
Embarrassing snafus gone viral.
you know what I
Broad.
mean? Like,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is hilarious. And that, yeah, it's gone viral. It's Mercury in the loud sign of Aries in the group chat, like having just gone retrograde, ruling the chart. And yeah, I just thought it was super funny how that was a star in the chart. I was also going to say that we all know this, but just to like at the same time, 7 days before that eclipse in Virgo, which again, south node, so it signals possibly a loss of something. Mercury is very much in its shadowy pre-retrograde vibe on March 7th, that these words are disappearing in the new Trump administration article was published in the New York Times. And words like accessible, activism, activists, inequity, LGBT, LGBTQ, marginalized, men who have sex with men, mental health, MSM, multicultural, political, oppression, non-binary, Native American, pregnant person, pregnant people, prejudice, privileges, privilege, racial diversity, racial identity, racially, racism, sex, sexuality, trauma, traumatic, tribal, victim, women, and underrepresented. All of these words, yeah, that word, yep, just women. I mean, I'm like, there's like lists and lists and lists. But as President Trump seeks to purge the federal government of woke initiatives, agencies have flagged hundreds of words to limit or avoid, according to a compilation of government documents. So, right before we have the very first eclipse in Virgo, ruled by Mercury, stationing retrograde, la la la, words just like women are like, hey guys, maybe let's not say that anymore.
I'm like literally speechless.
In like documents that are like, oh yeah, this is what we do. This is the work we do. These are the people that we serve. These are the issues that we work on. So Like the loss of words being connected with a South Node in Virgo eclipse, the South Node moving through Virgo is just like, ah. And because, Sonia, my wife, does the work that she does, and we know so many activists, like, I know this, like, I know people losing their life's work, losing money, losing all kinds of things, not being funded because either they were getting government money, federal money, or because funders are now like, oh, we can't fund anything that says gender in it, or says equality in it, or says women in it, or says queer people, or says trans people. So just like the loss of money, which is, I think, also connected to like the Mercury of it all, connected to the South Node being in Virgo, like the loss of being able to account, get money, do your business, even if it's a nonprofit. So yeah, that was a stunning example of absolute incompetence and DUI hires and white mediocrity hire and all those things on blast on the world stage for everybody to see.
I heard, just as speaking of it, like ridiculousness, I heard one person was denied entry into the US because they were delivering a paper on biodiversity. Like it had the word diversity in the name. I don't know if they knew what biodiversity was, but it doesn't actually
I don't
involve
think so.
real
Human
diversity,
beings.
like people diversity.
Human beings. Yeah,
But
I don't think so. They were like, no diversity, monocropping only. I only want to talk about one. And then I also just want to say, like, this stunning moment that's like everywhere. Elon was talking about it, and all these other like right-wing pundit, podcaster men are saying, as they're talking about the death of empathy. And I thought that was wild as Neptune moved from Pisces into Aries. There being like this whole conversation. It's like a whole thing. They're trying to put together like a whole, like curriculum on how empathy is the worst thing that you could have. And I just thought, like, Neptune is associated with compassion and associated with like dissolving boundaries and barriers. And in Pisces, it's supposed to be super empathetic. And as it moves into Aries, we're having like the Nazi fascist talking points be like, empathy is for losers. And we don't win with empathy. We win without empathy. There's that. It's so boring and it's so like overused and it's so trite and it's so like from 1933 playbook. But here we are. And a lot of young men, especially, I think a lot of young white men really like believe it and buy into it.
I mean, we have 14 more years of this.
Of Neptune and Aries.
The thing about Neptune leaving Pisces, I feel like I was like, oh, we're kind of like passive.
Yeah.
The last 2010s.
Really passive.
Yeah.
We're like Obama can fix it all.
We'll just learn like spiritual practices and like,
Yeah, bypass it all.
As we mentioned, Neptune was last in Aries 150 years ago. And what happened in that 15-ish year period when Neptune was last in Aries is, well, one of the things that happened is that the quote unquote Dominion of Canada was formed. So, I mean, people have lived in what is now Canada and North America for many tens of thousands of years, more than that. But the state of Canada began to exist in legal terms in 1867, which is when Neptune was last in Aries. So we are entering our Neptune return as a country. And I find it notable that as we are entering this once every 165, 150 year moment, the very sovereignty of our country is being challenged by the leader of the country that has historically been our closest ally and friend. It is a surreal time to be a Canadian, just on a personal note. Like every time I listen to a New York Times podcast, I get a little message from the government of Canada in both English and French that tells me it's like a very patriotic message that's like, we are this and we are that and buy Canadian and stay in Canada and don't leave the country. But it's very rah, rah, rah.
Which is so, for anybody who's not Canadian, that's so not a Canadian thing to do. Like, we are not that loud. We're like, America can be loud. Canadians are not like that.
It's not, and it's surreal, and you'll hear at the end, "This is a message from the government of Canada," and it's funny that they're playing it
Oh
on
my
the New York
God.
Times podcast because it's like, y'all are the ones listening to American media. I don't get this on CBC podcasts. But anyway, we are in a moment where they are trying to be defiant. The amount of travel to the US has dropped off a cliff compared to what it normally is. People are canceling holidays or they're flying back home. Some of that is because they're afraid of being detained by ICE, and some of that is out of protest.
Yeah.
You have people who are literally like pouring their California wine down the sink, which
Yeah.
doesn't help because you already bought the thing. But in any case, people being selective about where they're buying their food, trying to buy locally. So there is a real upsurge in nationalism and patriotism, and also an upsurge in anti-Americanism.
Which is like very interesting to have your Neptune and Aries return, because we could say Aries is very much about identity in a way. It's like the self. It's the,
It's about the self. Yeah.
yeah.
Sure.
And so Canada's
No.
like, wait a minute, we have an identity.
We have a self.
We do.
We count too.
Let us storytell our identity. It's just so Neptune in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, elbows up. There are a lot of like hockey references floating around.
Yeah.
But there
Wayne
are other...
Gretzky has been kicked out of the Canadian club because he's a Trump supporter. How did that even happen? He's like the nicest hockey player that ever, like he's the, he's known as like the most, I don't know what you say, like the most gentle hockey player. Like he's like not like a brute. Like he was like, super skilled. Anyways. So he's been like, I mean, that's like one of our most famous people besides Jim Carrey or something. And he's been ousted. So it's a big deal.
And it's turned our election around. So this is like the big news for folks who live in Canada, because it was just a bygone conclusion that the Conservatives would win power because the Liberals had so just like drooped and wilted after the past 10 years of being in rule, and Trudeau, who was the prime minister, just had like such terrible popularity at the end of his second term. So now, because Trump is questioning our sovereignty and wanting to annex Canada, and the Liberals were really making a point to like fight back and to defy that, and to again like try and stoke our patriotism and nationalism. There has been a huge resurgence also in popularity for the Liberal Party. So now they're forecasted to possibly even win a majority government, which was never going to be even an option.
Do you think that that's a possibility?
First of all, I've never, like, just on a personal note, the Liberals are not exactly my party of choice. They're I would say center right at best. But way more preferable to Poilievre's Conservatives, who are basically like Trump B or mini Trumps in their branding and what they want to do. Though I don't historically support the Liberals, I definitely prefer them to Poilievre's conservatives. And I'm a little hesitant. What I fear is that there's so much coverage around how there's been this 180 and the Liberals might even get a majority government, that I'm worried that momentum won't deliver all the way to the polls, and we'll start resting on our laurels, and then he'll just like get it anyway. But Poilievre, that is, but I don't think he could get a majority government at this point. We'll see. But what's fascinating about the astrology around the Canadian election.
This makes me very nervous.
I know, me too.
Oh my God, it's the same astrology.
It's the same astrology as the American freaking election.
I don't like it, Eliza. I don't like it. With a new moon to just highlight it all in Taurus.
I know.
I just did readings for this week, so I'm like, oh, I don't like this week. Okay, go. Tell me why it's good.
Well, I'll tell you what is the most notable signature of this chart, which was also the most notable signature around the week of November 5th, or the week that included November 5th. And that is an opposition between Mars and Pluto. So people recall that there will have been 3 oppositions between Mars and Pluto over the course of Mars's retrograde and direct stations. Mm-hmm. The first happened on November 3rd, 2 days before the American election. Mm-hmm. The second happened in January, was it?
Mm-hmm. January 2nd.
And then the third is happening on April 26th, 2 days before the Canadian election.
Hate it.
I do not love it either. And as Chani also pointed out, it's the new moon in Taurus, which is very much like illuminating or
Squaring them both?
stoking. It's
Yeah.
T-squaring both Mars and Pluto. It makes me nervous.
What I was saying for a million years before the election is like, it looks like a steal. Like there's like a something that feels like thefty with this. It is Mars in Leo, which is different. When the election happened in the United States, it was Mars in Cancer, which was like
Mhm.
so bad because it was in Cancer and then up against Pluto at the edge of Capricorn, which was very resonant with the Sibley chart for America. So this does have a different kind of vibe. And I do think that the Mars in Leo up against Pluto and Aquarius is very class warfare vibes, because the last time that happened was the Luigi Mangione of it all. And so that could maybe be like a fight. Maybe it does rally the fighting spirit more than just like the we lost everything feeling of the November 5th election. So maybe that's good. It does feel like a hefty moment of massive consequence that has a lot to do with power.
And just like it is significant that this is so seated in the American election on
Yeah.
its own. Like Trump
Yeah.
has single-handedly turned this race around. And anytime he like just hiccups or like I don't know, snorts a little on a subject involving Canada, the polls change. And so I'm also nervous about what he's going to do. So we're recording this on April 2nd. He's going to announce in like an hour the latest round of tariffs on his so-called
Right.
Liberation Day. So I don't know what that will mean, but that could have an impact on how the polls do. If he ends up speaking too positively of Mark Carney, who's currently the prime minister, that could end up working against him. Like I just think there are so many variables, but it's I feel very uneasy that of all people in this equation, Trump is the one who really has the most power to change how people vote.
And that Mars is right on his Mars. It's close to his Mars.
He's got an early Mars, I think.
So maybe he'll run his mouth off and all the Canadians will get so pissed off. You don't feel like most Canadians want something like somebody who's going to be a super leader against Trump? And why
No, they
would
do.
why would the conservative even have a
I'm just
shot?
scared. I'm just scared that people are going to rest on their laurels. Like, but
I think but the conservatives do have a huge leg up, don't they? Because the liberals did so badly.
well, right now that's been turned around. So that they did have a huge leg up, but because of how Trump's piped in and Trump has become hugely. So here's the thing about Canada is that historically the Trump supporters were also like in the same Venn diagram circle as the Canadian patriots, like the people who
Yes.
actually
Yes.
celebrated Canada Day.
Yes.
The truckers, like they're all in kind of the same patch, but those people are the ones who are now pissed off because our sovereignty is being threatened. So it is actually meant that the people who were more inclined to vote for Polyev because he's Trumpy are now really turned off and suddenly they have a huge branding issue. So I am optimistic. I mean, most people are predicting that the liberals will win. I looked at the charts for the two leading candidates. That would be Mark Carney, who's currently leading the liberals and is currently the PM until we have this election, and Pierre Polyev. What's fascinating is they both have Virgo moons around the same degree. So, and they were both like hit by
The eclipse.
that Virgo eclipse. We don't have birth time, so that
Okay.
the exact placement of their moon could vary, but it was definitely in Virgo and could even have been like exactly around the eclipse. We don't know, but they were both certainly like their map for the coming weeks was totally overturned over the last few weeks with Trump saying all the things and like the whole election turning around. Um, they both have malefics activated around this election. But then like, because Pierre Polyev is a Gemini, Jupiter's also too close to his sun for comfort. But I don't know. Like I'm hopeful, but I just don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to take anything for granted.
Oof. Dicey, man. I would not have picked that date to have an election. What is wrong with people?
And yet they keep doing it.
Oh my God. That's weird. That's really weird, though.
It is weird.
I mean, it looks like the US election.
Oh,
But
exactly.
different.
That's what we're saying. Yeah.
But the thing is, too, also when you were talking, like how the allegiances have switched in the time, like it's so intertwined with what's happening here. It's like kind of like saying, like, it doesn't matter what country you're in, pro-Trump doesn't really help you out because like now like it's switched to the other party and that and you were saying the conservatives have had a leg up and now the liberals do. So
Because like Canada's, well, I don't know if the liberals will do anything for the healthcare system there, but like this is huge for Canada, right? Like this election is not only like about Trump, but it's about like how the entire country functions in terms of how socialist it remains or how like pro its citizens and their health and their well-being remains.
Yeah, and housing and like there are huge issues that people I think should be bolder about in their politics, but Trump's kind of stealing the show. One other thing I just wanted to mention, because we've done so much talking this season about how like these comparisons to the 1960s. And one thing I've been struck by is this parallel of like there's so many Americans who are now fleeing to Canada or who at least want to flee to Canada. There's one Yale professor who studies fascism who has
Yeah.
moved from Yale to U of T because he can see America becoming fascist more than it already was. You have like the first family who's resettled to Canada. But what it reminds me of is in the 1960s, a lot of draft dodgers, so called, arrived because they didn't want to fight in the Vietnam War. And we actually like so that started in 1965 and then when Pierre Trudeau, which was Justin Trudeau's dad, when he came into power in 1968, he actually made a rule that said that border officers couldn't ask about people's military status. So that actually created a huge uptick of folks basically fleeing America to avoid fighting in the war.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is all the people I grew up with.
Right.
Like I grew up in a tiny
In
little
Nelson.
town, of an enclave of folks from like my mom, obviously wasn't going to be drafted to the army, but she was part of that leaving. And a lot of the guys a lot of the dads, a lot of people's dads were conscientious objectors and fled the country.
But I think we're seeing a new season of that.
Okay.
So now we're going to go into the Ask Me Anything. And the question that we have for this episode is it normal to feel transitions a few days after they happen rather than during? But I guess that could also be applied to before. So the period of time, which is a really good question because we always talk about the days that the transits happen, but the energies are online a little bit before and after. And like from my perspective, as I'm reading this question, like the image that came to me is like opening a door, seeing something, maybe the exact transit, and then closing the door. But that's all part of your relationship to what you opened the door on. And so opening a door would be like an applying aspect where two planets are approaching their what we call perfection, where they're about to complete the aspect and be exact. And so it's completely normal to be like a couple days out before a major transit. Um, like we're talking about Mars-Pluto opposition, something that's especially really stunning, especially if the planets are very slow moving, to feel those energies online a couple days before, even way before, and then to feel it after, right? It's like then you kind of walk away from it, but you're still kind of living with either some outcome that's happened or the energy is like waning. It has that kind of feel to it. So I think aspects, like major aspects, happen like that between two planets. But also, even eclipses, I would say it's like a 40-ish day kind of thing because lunations happen where the eclipses typically happen in pairs. So we're talking then about a new moon, a full moon, and that's like a month. But even those frameworks be outside of that, that you could still feel like, wow, the things are really loopy right now. They're unexpected, they're shadowy, they're like, what's happening here that kind of like shifting beneath your feet. I feel like you can also, there's like a much larger time period for like eclipse season.
Well, yeah, and if we're talking about like when a planet enters a sign, if you like let's say you have the sun at 15 degrees of Cancer. So you might feel Jupiter's presence, for example, when it enters Cancer, as soon as it enters Cancer, but you might actually feel it months later when it's closer to that degree. So especially for the slower moving planets, it's going to take a beat probably because the energy will intensify as like Thea said, as that aspect becomes closer, as it perfects. But also when it comes to slower moving planets that are making an aspect with each other, um, like, we're right now experiencing, or soon to be experiencing, a very, very, very close conjunction between Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And that's an aspect that's going to take like more than a year to actually perfect, but we are definitely feeling the impact now, and I suspect we will definitely be feeling it for months after. So it can depend on the points in your own chart, and it can also depend on the speed of the two planets. If it's something like a moon conjunction with something, because the moon moves so fast, it'll likely be shorter lived. So there are a lot of different pieces um, that help us understand like how and when we might feel the impact of a certain transit.
And I explain it. I usually use the metaphor really similar to what you're saying, Thea. I kind of like, you're throwing a party and you're like, okay, people are coming, and you hear a knock at the door. And so the knock on the door is like the signal, like something's here. And that's like the moment before the transit. And then I move to the door, and that's me like having the like, oh, something's here. And then I open the door and I come face to face with the person, and that's the beginning of the exact transit. Then they come into my house. We have a party. That's the full transit. And then I say goodbye to them and they leave, and that's the post transit. So
You have to clean up the mess.
yeah, I feel you for a while. I'm processing what you said. I'm like, oh, can you believe that? And then so and so said this. And then, it's like the after party thing where you're talking about everything that happened. Oh my God, when so and so said something, it was so funny. And then it made me think of this. And so it's like the whole kind of gestalt of it. Like you're expecting people to come, you're waiting for them, you're hearing them, you're moving towards them, then you're having the actual experience with them. And then there's the post experience. And then exactly what Eliza said, like it depends on, like for me, when I look at like a Saturn return, I'm looking at a 2.5 year period of time. So because we are traditional astrologers, we also think in terms of like the full sign and the amount of time it takes the planet to go through that sign. So I think of the I think of the Saturn Neptune conjunction as being like, this is the pregame of it. And because they're going to make an actual conjunction in Aries, I think of it as like, this is like the pre, and then for the full 2.5 years of Saturn being in Aries, I will consider them. And as, having that kind of conjunction, it's a little bit trickier because of how slow Neptune is, but Neptune will stay behind and Saturn will keep moving. But that post party hangover thing that's going to happen between Neptune and Saturn, I'm going to extend it until until Saturn moves into Taurus, because that will be when it's like over, because they were together in Pisces too. So you could almost extend it out like a 4-year period of like the pre build up, the pre-game, then the actual thing, and then the post. But when you're experiencing something in your own chart, like say you have Jupiter's a good example because it moves not too slow and not too fast. It stays in a sign for a year. So like what Eliza's saying, it's like, okay, my ascendant is at 20 degrees of Cancer. Well, I know Jupiter's entering Cancer in June of this year. I'm not going to feel it until next year, but it's going to be around. Like the best person at the party is like at the door. You like super excited, and you're like, you can get like the vibe, the expectation, like something is coming. And so for a transit like Jupiter, you can start to feel it come in, possibly starting to magnify things. For something like Pluto, it's going to take so long to roll. It's going to go back and forth, most likely over a point. And so it's going to be years. It's going to be like a 1.5 to 2 years of the exact party moment. And then it will go. And then it's like, it's a different kind of vibe. So it really does depend on the planet what we're talking about. Like Eliza said, how fast it's going. But there is this thing of it being in the same sign as the planets or the points that you have that can be important, which why having a Mars retrograde hang out in Cancer for so long and then post its retrograde hang out in Cancer for so long can be so hard on all the Cancer placements, all the Libra, all the Aries, all the Capricorn placements, because it's supposed to move quickly, but it's just like this irritant that kind of has been festering in this one place. and causing a hard time for all of the cardinal signs. So normally a Mars transit would be super quick, but because it was retrograde, it's like really just, he was stuck around for such a long time. And so there are ways in which when a planet retrogrades over something in your chart, there's going to be a first, when it's direct, it'll go over something, then it'll station retrograde, then it'll back up over something in your chart, then it'll station direct, then it'll back over again. And so then you have to look at that kind of whole time period. So in the Chani app, we'll say like, this planet's retrograde, it's going to do this 2 more times, or this is the 3rd time it's doing it, and it was this time frame. So you can kind of get the gist of like, oh, this is like the knock on that. It's like you have somebody comes to the party, you're like, hey, how's it going? And you do the party, and then they leave, and they're like, oh my god, I forgot my phone. You're like, oh, come back, and then they come back again. You're like, oh my god, what the fuck are you doing here? Like the party's over, but you guys keep coming back. Why? And then they finally leave, unless it's Jupiter, and then you want it to come a bunch of times.
I feel like that's that vibe of having to tell someone they have 3 Saturn returns, like by exact. You're like, sorry.
Yeah. But then, like if this is the 3, if this is the 3rd one, then this is we got
The
it.
final
Like
goodbye. The final
yeah.
push.
Yeah. You're going to really learn the lesson. I mean, if you don't, that's,
Good luck.
you're bad. Let's talk about the upcoming. We won't meet again until the end of April. So when you look at April, what is there that jumps out at you that you are thinking about, that you're pondering? And do you have any predictions for April?
I mean, for me, it's definitely that Mars-Pluto opposition. Like, look, the first time that happened, I got into a car accident. The second time that happened, I
Oh.
had a personal conflict in my life. So this one is exact between my descendant and ascendant axis. So I'm gonna just like stay home and hide. But do I have a prediction? I mean, I'm nervous about the election, the Canadian election, but cautiously hopeful. And otherwise, just because of how the track record of this transit in my own life, I'm also nervous for me. But I don't want to make a negative prediction for me because that's how anxiety happens. But yeah, might lay low that day.
We should just cue Anxiety by Dochi.
Yeah.
Mars Pluto also. Quick prediction. I think it's the fascism. I was hoping it would be like about defiance, and it can still be for sure. I think we'll be online with both of those energies, whether it's like overreach in terms of like power and institutions or police or forces that can come and take you. I mean, that the thing you were saying earlier, Chani, about theft, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also just like, Mars, Pluto, that's like also where the US has its nodes. I was like looking at that. It's the nodes are
God.
at like 6.
Oh God.
So 6 Leo. Yeah. So it's just like, and they're in
Really?
third and
So Mars stationed retrograde on the node of the.
on the North Node. Yes. I thought
Did
I
we know
said that.
that?
I remember
Probably. It's
yeah.
too much to remember.
It is too, but I remember because
God.
that's the US's 9th house, and it had a lot to do with immigration as well. So I was wondering if like ICE and all safe, like all the kind of thing of people being allowed to leave or not leave or being, yeah, I think that's gonna just be really online.
Yeah. I do too. And I, not to bang this drum too much, but I do think that maybe something about the actual court case with Luigi, because it's just been announced that they want to seek the death penalty for him.
What? Are you serious? I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Trump administration is trying to bring back the death penalty, like all fascists do. So that is online, and so I do feel like something about that might happen. But I like what you're saying, Thea. I don't like the idea of them overreaching, but I do think that with the overreach comes the reaction, and so I am looking to see like what kind of fight happens with this 3rd and final round of this particular setup between Mars and Pluto occurs. It does feel particularly eruptive to me. And I do think it's interesting because the conversation of class consciousness was so massive in the beginning of December, and this is the next and last iteration of that, because it is the only time that Mars has been in Leo and Pluto's been in Aquarius. The first time, again, was between Cancer and Capricorn, so it was a little different over the election. But one of the things I do have my eye on is that it's happening right before May Day. It's happening right before International Worker Rights Day.
Mm.
And so I am like, what is going to be happening in labor movements? Not that the Leo Aquarius is like Aquarius may be about labor movements in terms of like the collectives, but I'm just wondering if there's a confluence of events around then, if there'll be another kind of big wave of pushback, if that will be a galvanizing point. And so when I'm doing the readings for that part of the year, like your weekly readings, and this goes back to the Ask Me Anything question, it's like I'm looking at the reverb of the Mars-Pluto opposition for many weeks after it happens. So it happens at the end of April, but it's hanging out all May because like Mars doesn't leave for a while. So, and then things will start to, a faster moving planets like that new moon will happen. And then like other planets will move through Taurus and start to like ding, 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 and like pick up on Pluto. And then a couple of days later, pick up on Mars. And it's like we keep reliving that thing. So I do think that whatever happens within these themes that we're talking about, like I don't know, is Mars the Luigi Mangione? Is it the rogue, fighter that goes out and like does something to try to take down the Pluto power of it all? Is it a groundswell of Pluto and Aquarius like revolution kind of energy that the Mars, like pokes at it enough that it kind of does something? Like who is who, what is what in the whole strategy of it. But it does feel like something, because that moment, if we go back to the beginning of December, we were all talking about his strategy, and Mars is the strategist, it's the warrior. So we were like, how did he pull this? Like what? And the monopoly, the whole gamifying of it, and the impossibility of how it happened. Like it's like a seventh, eighth wonder of the world. Like, how did he actually do it? It's bananas. It's impossible for one person and to have a back injury and to like to have done all that stuff. So I don't know. I'm just looking at it like, what is going to happen that's like a reverb or rhymes with it or echoes it or like mirrors it in some way that's going to help us pick up on this idea of our rights, our collective power, our need to like be very forceful in our demanding of systems change.
I mean, I do think Mars opposite Pluto and Aquarius, it does feel very fight the oligarchy. Like that.
It feels very David and Goliath, right? That's what I keep saying in the readings.
I just feel like, I mean, the movement is already happening. It's already unfolding. It's as you mentioned, it's drawing tens of thousands of people to rallies. So it's just a matter of sustaining that, and then who knows, maybe something further will unfold.
And Mars goes in. So Mars goes into Leo on the 17th of April. So that's when the opposition to Pluto really gets going, right? Like that's when it's back in sign to sign opposition. So that's the date that I'm like, oh, this is the beginning of it. And then it lasts until Mars leaves Leo, which is weeks and weeks after that. But the like main like moment, the moment that it's like, oh, this is the thing. Now they've met, they were face to face, is that April 26th. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll be back just after that, I believe. So we'll see what happens. I do also think that the full moon, I got to say this, the full moon of April.
In Libra?
Yeah, the full moon in Libra looks a little gnarly to me.
Little ouchy.
A little ouchy. It is a sun conjunct Chiron. It's a Chiron Kazemi at the moment of the full moon, as the ruler of the full moon, Venus, is stationing direct. So it's like stunning astrology to me, like the like compilation. And Venus is stationing direct in a conjunction with Saturn and the North Node. So it's also like super like commitment issues, all of it together. It feels like it brings up a hurt or a pain because it's also being squared by Mars and Cancer.
Yeah.
And so there's just this kind of compilation with the full moon that happens. So that full moon is on April 12th. So it's like mid-month there's something that feels like, ooh, this is a wound. This is also a really good time to learn how to apply the medicine. But because Venus is stationing direct, it is a very significant moment for the Venus retrograde cycle as well. And because it's stationing direct in a conjunction to Saturn with the North Node, there's some kind of realism that we have to deal with. There is like the reality check. There is the need to commit to something. And there is a something taking shape, I think also. Saturn helps something to take shape, it makes something real. And the something is Venusian. Venus is the exalted ruler of Pisces. So it is about unions, it is about relationships, but it is about like literal, like collective unions. It is about our rights. It is about justice. It is about all of that. So I just think that's going to be a moment. I don't know. I just feel like that full moon is going to really, the Venus stationing is like such a wild compilation of things.
Bernie and AOC have a rally in LA on April 12th. So that's
Oh,
the day
wow.
of that full moon.
Wow.
It's
And
one
that's
to
her
attend.
moon. That's her moon. She's an Aries sun with a Libra moon. She's born at the full moon. So
Right. Wow.
no, sorry. No.
That's
The
the reverse.
That's the reverse of her moon. She is a Libra sun, Aries moon. This is a Aries sun, Libra moon. She's a full moon baby. This is a full moon. So it'll be interesting.
She still feels like spotlit from this lunation.
Yeah. All right, y'all. That's it. That's our episode.
That's it.
Thank you so much for joining us. Please keep writing in to give us your questions, your Ask Me Anything questions. You can also leave it here if you're watching this on YouTube, and we will do our best to get to all of them. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.